go, Brownies. Here we go. Here we go, Brownies. Here we go. Yeah, this for my dogs from the east to the west side. You rockin' brown and orange with me, baby. Let's ride. Represent the land, let them know. Tell them, here we go, Brownies. Here we go. Yeah, here we go.
Welcome in, everybody, to another episode of the Here We Go Brownies podcast. I am Allie Heisong, and I'm coming at you live from Sneads Ferry, North Carolina. And joined with me, as always, out in beautiful Cleveland, Ohio, we've got Dustin. Dustin, how's it going? How are you?
Allie, it's actually a nice day.
Looks
It's
beautiful.
actually
Look at that. Look at that
I
sunset.
look at this. We got the nights are getting longer here in Cleveland. The winter doldrums are going away. I'm excited for spring. I'll get excited, and of course, then it'll get cold. By the way, Allie, I have decided to do something. I know this is very ambitious, but I wanted to share this with you. I'm trying to lose weight, and as you get older, it sucks. It's hard to lose weight, and look good, feel good, all that. I'm going to do a 5K
Nice.
and a 10K back-to-back days in the Cleveland Marathon, and it's the only way you can get a medal is you have to do the 5K and the 10K like a Saturday, Sunday type of thing. Now, I'm not saying I'm going to run the entire 10K. Like, I'm just going to finish it, right? If I walk, run, jog, whatever. But I'm going to do it. It's in May 18th. If anybody wants to come out and join me for that, it's going to be fun. But I want the medal, and I think that's something. It's a cool goal to work towards. I got a little under 2 months, so let's go. So
That's incredible. I've never done anything like that, and I think that's very admirable, Dustin. So good luck to you. I would suggest, look, I've never done it, but if I know anything about it, is that the training is very intense. Whether you finish it while running or walking or crawling over the finish line, nonetheless, just getting over the finish line is the most important. So,
yeah,
good luck on your training. That's tough. That is tough. Back to back. That's a lot. That's a lot.
It starts tomorrow. And here's the thing: my legs will not give out on me. It's just not like I could walk it pretty easy. All that my lungs and that capacity is
Yeah.
the one thing that I worry about.
So you say
Is the
you say
endurance.
it's going to start tomorrow. Like, what's your training look like? What are you going to do?
Honestly, going down on the floor, the bottom floor of the Halley here with the K&D folks, and start going on the treadmill. Honestly, just
Yeah.
getting your body more acclimated to jogging, running. And I'm going to try to do that 4 to 5 days a week, all the way up till May. Like,
Yep.
I'm in it to
Good.
win it now. So yeah,
Yeah. All right. Well, that's awesome. Good luck to you, Dustin. You mentioned K&D, our friends over at K&D Property Group. Just want to give them a quick shout out, guys. Whether it is sophisticated suburban living, luxury downtown digs, or senior housing, K&D, the largest property management company in Northeast Ohio, has a perfect home for everyone. K&D is your one-stop shop for housing in the region with apartments and amenities for everyone, including residential, commercial, retail, and also corporate housing. Find your dream home at K&D. Visit knd.com to get started. That is the letter K, the word and, the letter D.com. Dustin, last we spoke, I was in Nashville, Tennessee, and we were talking about free agency, all that comes with it, what the Browns have done. I want to have a kind of a post that initial wave of free agency conversation, right? And talk about the state of the Browns. Because we've heard from Andrew Berry, we've heard from this team, and their ambitions going into this upcoming season. So I'd like to just talk about it. I think that they've done a really good job building this roster. We're not shy about that on this podcast. We put a lot of faith in this front office and what they're able to do. But I want to just turn it over to you for any remaining holes. Is there anything that's, really sticking out to you as, man, we really need to address this area? Or do you think if the season started tomorrow that we could go into it without, even before the draft, go into the season tomorrow with, a really competitive and playoff aspiring football team?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say we need more on defense when we have the number one defense in the National Football League. I do think the linebacker position could use a little more depth. The tight end position, I think,
Mhm.
could be addressed in the draft as well. I mean, there's just a couple key pieces there, here and there, that
Yeah.
need to be addressed. But, Andrew Berry brought up at his press availability at the NFL annual meetings that everybody's like, well, why do you have 4 or 5 running backs now and all that? And they're like, well, this is roster building. We carry 4 or 5, 6 running backs going into training camp. This is nothing new for the Cleveland Browns. So a lot of these 1-year deals, there was something made of the Browns looking at the Tennessee quarterback today. They may have 5 quarterbacks on their team. going into training camp. We don't know what that looks like, right? I mean, but they're not going to be five at the end of training camp.
No, no, that's crazy.
But but what is but Al, truly, I think what Andrew Barry has brought to this organization is competition, and everybody has to play at a high level. And we saw that
Mhm.
with the bringing on of Schwartz on defense and the defensive coordinator position. Like, look, we at the end of the day, we're building a roster every single day in Andrew Barry's mind. And so what he says is, hey, look, we're going to bring as much competition to training camp, and the best men will win
Yeah.
and play and make that 53-man roster, right? I mean, and that's kind of his mentality, right? I'm going to put out the best available out there, and whoever at the end of the day shows us the best in camp, preseason games, those are the guys that make the roster and the practice squad. And so I think he does this not by accident, but on purpose to try to get the best out of his current players and even see if, hey, by the way, this guy actually could be better than this other person. Let's put him on the roster. I mean, look, the D'Anthony Bells of the world, right? We
Sure.
had him on our show, and all of a sudden, there he goes, right? Like nobody saw that coming, but he earned his spot on that roster
Mhm.
because he outplayed, he outhustled some other guys. So I do think this is just normal Andrew Barry 101.
Yeah, look, I mean, yes, that's what free agency is, right? It is a relentless pursuit of improving your roster, and that's what every GM in the National Football League is going to do. They are in the business of improving your roster. I mean, no GM out there at this point in the game, anyways, is saying we have to be as bad as we possibly can. No, you go into the season as competitive and putting the guys on the field that can do the job and can do it to the best of their ability and building depth all the while. So, I mean, to answer my own question, would I be comfortable with the Browns rolling out tomorrow if the season were to start? I think so, actually. Like, I
Yeah,
think that what they've done in free agency creates so few holes that they have to address with a sense of urgency
right.
in the draft. And that's my point. Do they need to address things? Obviously. Of course, that's what the
Right.
offseason is. But to address it with urgency at this point, no, I don't think so. Yes, you mentioned linebacker. I don't think that that is resolved. I think that you have to have somebody else there. Defensive line, that's another one. Got to have
Mm.
somebody. I'm not entirely comfortable with it. These guys are getting older. I like it. I like the group, but I think that in the draft you can probably get another defensive lineman that can fill a need. Mike Hall would be very very intriguing, but I don't think he's going to be there when the Browns make their selection. I mentioned wide receiver before. Yes, they've gone out and they've done a great job in free agency, but as we look ahead to the future, I still think that needs to be addressed. But again, we're talking about if the season were to start tomorrow. And then tight end, of course. Another one I'm going to throw out there. I'm not comfortable with the tackles. Offensive line is aging. Like there are still some
And
areas that
and
need
and
improvement.
injury and injury. I mean, injury as
They're
well.
they're in they're injury prone, they're expensive, and they're old. I mean, that's not the best recipe for a successful line. And of course, you lose Bill Callahan. Don't forget that. So yes, there are
Yeah.
some things that need to be addressed. But if we had to play a game tomorrow, I think that would be a fairly competitive game, and you feel really good about the Cleveland Browns as who they are right here, right now. So let's talk a little bit more about the free agency and how we feel about it here in just a few.
Mhm.
At this point in time, we're talking about injuries, so let's go out on the medical minute, and we're going to bring on Dr. David Ullery to the program. But before we do so, here's a quick word from our friends over at Lorello Vineyards.
Everybody, my name's Kim Lorello, and my husband and I, Larry, started Lorello Vineyards over 21 years ago. We're a small cantina nestled in the Grand River Valley in Geneva, Ohio. Our winery consists of 2 beautiful tasting rooms, and we have 2 rooms that can transform into party rooms inside. Our menu here at Lorello's is home cooking. We have wood-fired Tuscan pizzas, paninis, salads, and several appetizers. We have award-winning wines that have won medals internationally, nationally, and locally. In the summer and springtime, we have a beautiful outdoor patio that also we have live entertainment. We also have entertainment sporadically through the entire year inside during our cool fall and winter months. Additionally, outside in the summer, we have a beautiful tent that can house several guests for a private function. We hope to see you soon, and if you want any more information on Lorello Vineyards, you can go to our website at www.lorellovineyards.com. We hope to see you soon.
All right, and with that, let's go ahead and bring on Dr. David Ullery, also known as my favorite guy, orthopedic surgeon, to the program, because we've got a lot to talk about, David. We got to talk about everybody else's favorite guy, Nick Chubb. Andrew Barry said that he's going to start running. So let's learn a little bit more about, the recovery process and what that looks like for him. But first off, of course, how are you? How's it going?
Hey guys, I am great. Allie and Dustin, thanks for having me on as always.
As I say, by the way, picture taking this weekend. I saw some.
Ah.
I saw some sneak. I saw some sneak peeks of that. Those look great. By the way, I don't know who you picked as your photographer, but we'll talk later. You know who I think would be a great winery to supply all your wine for your wine? Just thinking of that. I was thinking about that the other day. So
Maybe the sponsors of this segment, Lorello
Yeah.
Vineyards, they might be the right people for that. Yeah, we got our engagement pictures this past weekend, and first off, we saw what a weekend we had. I flew in from Nashville because I was there for work. Then I fly into Columbus. David meets me there. Saturday night, we go see Tim McGraw. So much
Oh.
fun. That was awesome. So cool. And then Sunday, we had our engagement photos, and that was, you know what that was? It was a lot of fun, but it was exhausting.
Oh yeah.
That night, I slept the hardest I've ever slept, but it was a lot of fun. So don't
Where
worry,
was
everybody. Pictures to come.
Where was Tim playing at?
Columbus and Nationwide.
Oh, at the Nationwide. Okay.
Yeah, it was great. So yeah, it was a really, really fun weekend. But we've got a lot to talk about, David, and that is our friend Nick Chubb. As we know, he's going to start running. And I just want to, I'd like to turn it over to you to learn a little bit more about the recovery process and, the post ACL surgery, just the overall, aspect of recovery and what that looks like. So I will turn it over to you.
Yeah, thank you. And I know we've talked about it a couple times now, but I mean, truthfully, is there anybody else we care about more when it comes to injuries on the team at the moment? So we'll talk about it every week if we have to, just to get an update on his progress. So we know he had surgery. He had two, one on September 29th and one on November 14th. We know that those are kind of a staged procedure where likely the meniscus was repaired at the first one, maybe the MCL, and then the ACL was probably reconstructed at the second one. So all in all, he's 4.5 months out from his second surgery, his final surgery. And so he's right in that kind of wheelhouse, as you alluded to, where Andrew Barry says he's going to start running this month. And then how does that work? What are more of the details of how we say, hey, you have made it to this point, now you can start running? Because it's not just as simple as you're 3 months out from surgery, time to run. I mean, there are criteria we have to hit. And if you've never had ACL surgery, if you're not a physical therapist or surgeon, you may not be familiar with that at all. And I just thought at least talking about that a little bit more may be insightful and just kind of get a better idea of where he's at in his recovery and how he got to that point. And so typically, a lot of what I'm going to be discussing here is based on a primary ACL surgery, meaning it's your first one. You tore it, you've never had surgery before, and we reconstructed it. So in the setting of Chubb, where this is now his second ACL tear, because he already did it once, and his third or fourth surgery, that timeline is probably shifted to the right a little bit, in the sense that if we say at 3 months most people start running, as we can see now, he's starting at about 4.5 months. And so again, it's just in the revision scenario and the secondary scenario, we know that recovery takes a little bit longer, as I've alluded to previously on the show. But now that he's going to start running, he can certainly accelerate through that. And so I actually have pulled up our specific rehab protocol at the hospital that we use, and that is used pretty much Navy-wide for ACLs. And so in months 3 to 4 after surgery, that is when we begin kind of a progressive return to run or jogging program. I talked about it before. They usually begin on an Alter G, which is the anti-gravity treadmill, just to help reduce the impact on the joint. Just because if you haven't been running or walking that much and having much impact activity, getting right back into high impact activity can be kind of detrimental, especially to the cartilage and the bone, just because what we like to say is bones love compression, bones love to be stressed, and cartilage does too. And so if you kind of go from 0 to 100 without anything in between, it can lead to increased damage. And so you start on the anti-gravity treadmill to sort of ramp your way up into it. But essentially, there's some criteria that have to be met for running specifically. And so our criteria include pain-free hopping, and then that's double leg hopping, and the ability to perform greater than 90% of the uninjured limbs max reps. And so if you can do a 200-pound single leg squat on the uninjured leg, you have to be able to do at least 180 pounds on the injured leg.
Okay.
And have greater than 60 degrees of knee flexion to be able to start running. And then, of course, that increases from week to week. And so that's kind of the basic, if you will, outline for what we do. Certainly there's more details, and I can kind of get into that. Other things included on that checklist are minimal to no swelling, because if there's swelling, there's still healing going on. There's still something going on. And so we don't want you to start running. Being able to get the knee fully extended. Now, I did say up to at least 60 degrees of flexion, but truly the more important thing is getting that knee all the way straight, getting it locked out in extension, because, I mean, that's when you're impacting the ground or during the gait phase of running and moving your leg. Extension is critical. It's important for going up and down stairs. It's important for running. It's important for just general life function, ambulating normally. And so knee extension is a must, full extension. Like I said, we kind of look at 90% strength in the injured leg versus the uninjured. Some of these other resources that I've looked at have talked about 60 or 70%. Either way, it's greater than 50%. You have to have a good amount of strength in that leg before you can actually start running and stressing it. And some more specific exercises that we look at include, and it's really all single leg exercise, just because we want to make sure that injured or leg that had surgery is strong. So single leg sit to stand from a chair. So I mean, literally in a chair, hands kind of up, and being able to stand up. I mean, I don't know if I can do that right now on my own. But that is one of the criteria.
Yeah, I'm gonna try. I don't know if I can.
One
So
leg,
you just stand up. Wait, on one leg.
On one
I
leg.
don't know if I can do it on two legs. Hang on. All right, everybody. I'm gonna do
Don't
it.
use your hands.
All right, no hands. You can see that right here. Okay, I did it. All right.
Was that one leg or two?
That was one.
All right, there you go.
I'm an athlete.
10 of those.
You
got to do 10 of those.
I will say this.
No, that's not gonna happen.
I will say this, David. When a couple of weeks ago, when Nick was down doing the signing, I was very cognizant to watch his gait and see how he was doing. He was not limping, and he was walking around normal. So that made me feel at least there's no, at least he's walking like you said now.
Yeah.
But,
So there's no at this point in his recovery, there's no lingering issue or hang up. There's no swelling to give him a limp, and he can get fully extended. And so both of those things are truly crucially important, because if you don't have the motion, then you can't run. And so as Ali just demonstrated for us, there's the single leg sit to stand from a chair. Also the single leg squat, single leg hamstring chair bridge. And so that's where you're kind of laying on your back and your upper back is on a chair and you're on one leg and you're able to hold that bridge. Single leg calf raises, single leg balancing, and single leg plank holding. And so these are all sort of more criteria. And then just one last thing, I know we're getting kind of into the weeds here a little bit, but from the International Journal of Sports Physical Therapy in 2020, they kind of had this spelled out pretty nicely in this checklist, and it gives us a good idea of where he is on this timeline. And so they basically said they have a 10-task progression after ACL reconstruction, going from walking all the way to sport-specific movements. And so it's kind of, again, this checklist, not just to get to running, but to getting to the full recovery. And so it's 1 through 10. The first one's walking. The second one is bilateral exercises, so squatting, things like that, where you're on both legs. The third one is single leg, as Ali just demonstrated for us, where you do single leg squat, things like that. The fourth one is landing, so where you're on an elevated surface and you can jump down to it and land. And then the fifth one is running. And so according to kind of this progression, he is just now hitting his halfway point in this recovery. Now, that doesn't mean his recovery is only going to take 6 months. This isn't linear. I mean, in the timeline of how he recovers, but just in terms of the task progressions, he's at least at halfway in terms of the check marks he needs to get. And so running for them, you have to have more than 130 degrees of flexion, and again, greater than 70% of the non-injured leg. Once he gets through running and kind of gets up to straight line speeds, being able to run up to 10, 15, 16 miles an hour, then they go on to bilateral plyometrics, where they do more side-to-side jumping, angular jumping, things like that. Number 7 is unilateral jumping and landing. And so not only are you doing unilateral or single leg exercises, now you're jumping on that leg by itself. And you can imagine that puts a lot of stress on a normal knee. And so you have to be pretty far along in your progression. And then the last 3 are plyometrics on the single leg, multi-directional movements with cutting, and then finally sports-specific movements, which you can imagine what they are for a running back. And so this is not it's not kind of shooting from the hip. It's not vague. Like, this is very scientific. It's very specific.
Yeah.
There are specific measurements, devices, instruments that they use every single day, every step of the way to make sure he is ready to move on to the next step. And so it is very encouraging to hear that he's going to start running, because that means he's at least able to have that strength in that leg with single leg exercises. And he's probably able to do some jumping, not some jumping or some landing even from height, and do it comfortably. And so he's definitely making progress as we would expect, and it's encouraging for the upcoming season. But again, like I said, he's only halfway through this. And so there's
right. So, whenever you see on Twitter, like Rappaport or Schefter, they always say when it comes to somebody's injury along their recovery, they have met the criteria to return to play or return to practice or whatever. I guess when, like, as a casual fan, you read that and you're like, oh, okay, cool. I never actually have considered what that criteria was. And David, is that kind of what you just laid out? Is that across the board for every team in the NFL is held to this specific standard, or is that just how it is for ACLs? Like, is that what that looks like for everybody?
I mean, I would say, this is just, again, one specific injury, one joint, one body part. We have, for us in the military and just in our practice, we have criteria like this for every injury that we treat, for every surgery that we treat. There are protocols, there are criteria. And so certainly it's going to be that way in the NFL, and even more detailed. Now, if it's uniform across the league or not, I can't speak to. I would imagine probably not. That's pretty hard to unify in uniform. At the end of the day, sure, the league cares about player safety and health, but they're going to leave that up to the teams. They're going to kind of leave it up to, consider it like, the federal versus state government. Like, at the end of the day, like, the teams are going to be able to determine what exactly their protocols are and their criteria are, but at the end of the day, they're all going to look very similar. Now, there may be a conglomerate or group of physicians and sports, like the team doctors, that have all agreed upon a certain thing, or they may bring their own little flavor to the table. But again, it's all going to look fairly similar, but it will be specific to each injury, and they'll make sure that they have to go through that process and meet all of these steps before they move on to the next one and before they can finally recover. So in a lot of ways, it's like we talk about with the concussion protocol. Just like any other injury, they have protocols too. And so, like with the concussion protocol, it's like a 7-step process where you have to clear one before you can move on to the next. And if you cannot clear it, you stay at that step until you no longer have headaches or symptoms and move on to the next. And so it can kind of be thought of as the same way for more musculoskeletal injuries.
Sure.
And it's all about ensuring that these players can return to performing the way they had before, with minimizing their re-injury risk.
Sure.
I have a
go
couple
ahead.
of questions for you, David. So twofold. In your surgeries that you've done, have you ever done a surgery similar or dealt with a patient that had multiple, injuries like this, like a Nick Chubb, where you're going back and having to fix that same because he, tore the knee up again? Have you had any? That's my first question. And then second, as we get closer to the season and he actually goes out and plays in a game, would we see him in any kind of protective gear around that knee to insulate it a little bit? Will there be any type of special thing that he may wear to maybe not take that violent hit possibly? Will that be anything that we may see? So just a twofold question there for you.
Yeah. So, to answer the first one, in my practice, I have dealt with and experienced this, whether it's, coming in someone who had their ACL done by someone previously and re-injured it, or one of my own patients. I've had a handful where they re-injure it. And so I've seen this, and it's for anyone who does regular sports medicine or specifically ACL injuries, it's not uncommon to see this, just because we know certain people, based on anatomy or sport that they play, are a little bit more prone to these types of injuries. And a lot of times those people want to get back to it. And so they're going to continue to put themselves at risk. But again, it's about quality of life. If you love doing something, I'm going to make sure I can at least try to get you back to what you were doing before. Right. And you just have to understand that you're at a little bit increased risk having had this injury already. But yeah, I certainly have seen something just like this. Obviously not on an NFL athlete, but still some pretty high level athletes and, active duty military who I consider elite athletes to some degree, depending on what their role is within the military. And to answer the second part of your question, initially after surgery, we typically give a very big, bulky brace. It's something that reduces what range of motion of the knee and immobilizes it pretty significantly, just because the surgery is a shock to the leg and the system, as well as a nerve block to help reduce pain after surgery. And so we have to give them something to protect the knee during that initial rehab phase. Once you get to the point where where he kind of is in running and then advances to plyometrics, there's a more sport specific or more streamlined brace that we usually provide.
Okay.
It's the ones that you see a lot of college linemen wear.
Yeah.
And take notice maybe this football season, when you watch the games on Saturday and then you watch the games on Sunday, one thing in particular to notice is that all of the college linemen are wearing this brace, and there's nobody in the NFL that wears these braces. And what that tells me is that, and as we know, bracing does not prevent or reduce ACL injuries. It doesn't. And so I haven't quite figured out why we see it across the board in college, but not in the NFL. But I think that the NFL probably takes a very academic approach to it. And they're like, listen, like, these things don't do anything, and it's just cumbersome, it's expensive, and it's unnecessary. And so for Chubb, we may see him wear that brace, but it's probably going to be under his pads. So you may not even notice it. You may not even see it. But at the end of the day, like I said, we know that bracing does not prevent or reduce the risk of injury once someone has fully recovered. And so, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think, last season, all of his time in the NFL, he has not been wearing a brace on that leg.
Correct.
That we know of. Yeah.
Right.
That we can see, nothing visible. And so I anticipate when he gets back into game action this season, it will be much the same. Externally, we probably won't see anything. And if he is wearing anything, it will be under the brace. But again, our science, our data, our literature has proven that bracing does not do anything to reduce the effect of re-injuring your ACL.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask you this every time you're on that we talk about Nick Chubb, because, he's every Browns fan's, number one player. Like, he is such a fan favorite and kind of the heart and soul of this offense. So I'm going to ask you this every single time, just about the anticipated recovery for him. Do you think it's possible to expect him back week 1? That's the first question. And the second question is, if we do see him play this year, do you think that we see the Nick Chubb that we know and love? Or is there still, a possibility that, he does take a step back? Because I think we're all kind of possibly expecting that just due to the gruesome nature of his injury. But, is it possible that he could be the player that we know?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think it's an important question, and one every fan and just
thank you
follower of a sports team is going to ask and should be asking. And so to get a little bit more of a, I guess, scientific or official answer for you, I don't know if we've talked about this study in the past or not, but I just pulled it up quick here on my iPad from the Orthopedic Journal of Sports Medicine in 2022. The title of the study is Return to Play and Performance After ACL Reconstruction in NFL Players. And so, this is exactly what we're looking at.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a study because, as we know, there's a database that they have access to and that they collect. And so in this study, there were 312 NFL players, 55% of them returned to play, 55%. And of those players who returned, only 28% remain in the league 3 years after the injury. So I do think we have talked about this in the past. And again, quarterbacks are the most likely to return to play. Running backs have the largest decrease in AV, which is the approximate value, which I think is their performance. And so, I do not think we will see Nick Chubb week 1. The average time to return to play in this study was 12.4 months after the injury. 12.4 months, and then the standard deviation was 2.5 months. So even if we say the most optimistic time frame, the most optimistic recovery and ideal recovery, we're still looking at 10 months. And so for Chubb, that is September. So sure, in a very, very, very ideal, optimistic, perfect world, there's a chance. But this study was done in primary ACLs, first time ever, not years, and for him, a second time. And so I still do not think he will be playing week 1. And, it will take close to a miracle to say that he will be the same player that we saw.
Sure.
We already know that he is an outlier. He's recovered from a very similar injury, and it was the best running back in the league. And so we know that he's done it before. So there's nothing to say that he cannot do it again. But you have to maintain your expectations to some degree because this is a serious thing. And we know how detrimental it can be to a running back in the NFL. And so, will he play again? Yes, I think for sure we will see him suit up. He will play. I don't think it'll be week 1, and I don't know if I can say it's going to be the same Nick Chubb that we've seen in the past. That's no reason. I mean, that's not me saying like don't hope for that, don't pray for that, because it can happen. And I want, there's of course hope and there can be expectations for that, but we also have to live in a real world and know that he may only be 75% of what he was before.
Sure.
And if he is, he's still in the top half of the league. So,
He's still
I was gonna say,
running back in the league. Yeah.
As I say, 75% of Nick Chubb is still top 5 to 7 running backs in the National
I mean,
Football.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's good to know. That's very helpful. And Dustin and I obviously appreciate, but I'm sure a lot of our listeners appreciate that because, as we know, Nick Chubb is the heart and soul of this offense in so many ways, and one of the reasons that a lot of people are fans of this team. So, that's. So Brian here. I don't know, David, if you are familiar, but Brian, somebody recently stole something of his down at an event. So he wants to know if he breaks some legs in Maslin, how much will those surgeries set him back?
Well, I mean, is he breaking the legs and paying for the surgery?
No, I Brian, honestly, just break the legs. You'll be good. You'll be good.
Yeah. So we'll after David comes off here, we'll explain what happened and we'll talk about that event.
Yes,
Oh, no.
Of course we will. We will. All right, David, thank you for joining in. That was very informative and very helpful, and we appreciate you. Go Browns.
Go Browns. Thanks, guys.
That is Dr. David Ullery. That's a medical moment brought to you by our friends over at Lorello Vineyards. Dustin, I'll turn it over to you. Let's talk about it. What happened? What went down?
Well,
how can we raise some awareness for this? Because it's not right.
So first and foremost, Friday night, Allie, we had excess of 300, maybe 400 people show up in Massillon, Ohio. The line went out the door for an hour and a half, Allie, no joke, to see Frank Minifield, Hanford Dixon, and Felix Wright. There were Browns backers clubs that came from all over the state. It was wild. Our friends Todd from Xenia, Brian was there.
Yep.
Brian brought the bone, which is, you see that at the Muni lot. You see it at a lot of places around Cleveland. People love to have their picture taken with it. We had our first picture taken with it when we first met for the first time over in West Cleveland. So anyway, long story short, Brian painted what used to be a Modelo helmet. He sanded it down, and he spent literally meticulously hours to make this Browns helmet and paint it and make it look great. And so he put it up under the bone and lit it up and all that. And unfortunately, during our event, after it got dark, somebody stole this helmet it's pretty big from outside the Buffalo Wild Wings. And unfortunately, that happened. I truly believe it was nobody that came to the event, right? It was nobody that actually came there and, to partake. It probably was somebody that saw it, drove through the parking lot and took it. So if you do know or know any whereabouts of this helmet, it would be great to get it back in Brian's hands. I know they're looking at some security footage. If you just bring it back, no questions asked, no charges will be pressed. Just bring it back to that Massillon Buffalo Wild Wings, and all will be good. But it's just unfortunate. It was a great event, and then to have that happen, it looks like Brian's offering a reward well. So so it's just unfortunate, Allie,
it is.
that something great like that happened, and or something, great event like that, and then unfortunately, at the end of the night, you find that out, and it's, But you know what I will tell you, Allie, I learned this about Browns fans. Literally after that was found out, his post was shared in almost every Browns forum on Facebook and everywhere, not only in Ohio, but the United States. So here's what I'm saying: if you stole this bone, if you stole this helmet and you bring it out in public, I think people are going to know where you got this helmet, and you ain't going to be able to use it in public. So just give it back to the owner, do the right thing, and give it back to Brian so he can keep showing that off and bring that around to Cleveland and get kids and families enjoying and get pictures taken.
Yeah, that's too bad. If you know something, just bring it bring it to the right person. You hate to see that. Guys, we do want to tell you quickly about our friends over at Stadium Mustard. If you don't have Stadium Mustard in your kitchen this season, guys, you're doing it wrong. The iconic brand, the iconic taste, full from ballparks to backyards and everywhere in between. Stadium Mustard is smooth brown mustard, rich in both taste and tradition. And by the way, it is loved by millions. So be sure to head on over to stadiummustard.com to shop now. I'd like to have a little fun. Let's play a little fact or fiction tonight on the pod. This is one of my favorite things to do, especially in the offseason, because there's not a ton to talk about as it pertains to the Cleveland Browns. So we have to kind of.
We didn't even get into Cade York. Cade York.
We'll get there. We'll get there. Pump the brakes. We'll get there. But we gotta have fun first. We gotta have fun. Dedicated time for fun.
I thought the whole show was fun.
Well, we're extra fun. So let's start off. We won't spend a ton of time on this, but a little bit of fact or fiction. And I want to do free agency / the NFL draft edition, right?
Yep.
So what has happened this offseason or what we predict to happen this offseason, leading up to this next football season. So I'll go ahead and kick it off, Dustin. Let me pull up my list here. I'm gonna start with an easy one. I'll start with an easy one as it pertains to the NFL draft. Fact or fiction? Caleb Williams is the number 1 overall pick.
I'm going to say fact on that. I think he's that has been put out there. He's one of the most hyped NFL draft picks at a quarterback in some time. So I'm going to go fact on that. I mean,
Yeah,
I just feel like he is. So
yeah, I agree. Fact. That's why I wanted to start with that one. I think it's easy. I think it's kind of a no-brainer. We already know that the Chicago Bears have traded away Justin Fields to the gross Pitts Puke Steelers. But we know that they are making room for a quarterback. They've had a really amazing offseason or free agency period otherwise with who they've brought in. DeAndre Swift, Keenan Allen, they've certainly made some moves. So we know who it is. We know it is Caleb Williams, even though some people are so high on him. But that's the NFL draft for you. So Dustin, you're up.
This is funny, by the way. I don't have Allie's answers. She doesn't have my answers, but it's funny. My next question involves Caleb Williams as well.
Okay, let's do it.
And it is a fact or fiction. Is Caleb Williams going to be the best quarterback out of the 2024 NFL draft? Fact or fiction?
Oh, that's tough. So that's so hard to answer because we don't know.
Well, based on what you see, body of work,
I will say I think we could ask this question now and we could ask it after the draft, right? Like knowing where these guys go in the situations that they're in, because Caleb Williams to the Bears, who have made a lot of improvements, I can say yes. Versus Caleb Williams let's just say Caleb Williams was drafted in 2017, Mitchell Trubisky to the Bears. I would say no, maybe it is actually going to be, I don't know, Michael Penix Jr. or somebody like that. So my answer right here, right now is yes, he's going to be the best out of this draft class. I think there's a lot of talent here though, which will bring me to my next question that I have for you. It is also surrounding quarterbacks in this draft class. But is he the best? I would say yes, just based off of what we know right here, right now, and the anticipated situation that he'll be falling into. Now, if you tell me that, I don't know, Drake May is going to go to, God, I can't even think of a team that he would just plug right into. But let's just say, Drake May is going to the Cleveland Browns and he's going to be the starter with all the weapons that they have. We'd have a real argument here. Now, obviously, that's I'm totally hypothetical. That's not going to happen. Right. We all know this, everybody. I'm just using that as an example. But it totally depends on the situation. So I'll go fact yes right here, but I'd like to revisit that conversation after the draft once we know where everybody's going. What about you? What do you think?
I've looked at this and I'm going to go fiction. And the only reason I'm going to go fiction, and the reason I go fiction, is I just go back draft class after draft class after draft class. And the guy that got all the hype, all the notoriety and all that, guess who wasn't taken number 1 in the NFL draft? Patrick Mahomes. And guess what? He ended up being the best quarterback in that draft. And in fact, correct me if I'm wrong, 2 or 3 quarterbacks went ahead of him. And I guess
Deshaun Watson was one of them. Or right. Wait, no, it wasn't. Deshaun Watson went 12. Patrick was 10. Just kidding. But Trubisky went ahead of him.
Right. And I think a lot of these quarterbacks get a lot of limelight put on them. And I just think, I don't think I'm not saying he's going to be a terrible quarterback. Don't get me wrong in that situation. I just don't think in the long scale he'll be the best quarterback in this draft.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Joel here. Caleb Williams has bust potential. 100%. There's a lot that I have question marks with Caleb surrounding his play and his play only. And can he drop back and pass the football? And another comes from what Brian says here. Can the Bears protect him? I think that there's some real question marks about that. So I'm nervous about it. I agree with you, Joel, that he does kind of remind me of Daniel Jones in the sense that he will turn the ball over, and obviously you can't have that in the National Football League. So I think it's there. I think that he does has some bust potential, but super high ceiling as well for the kid. Okay,
Yeah.
fact or fiction, Dustin? 5 quarterbacks go in the first round of this year's NFL draft. Fact or fiction?
5.
5 in the first round. In the first
Five
round.
or, 5 or more. I'm going to say no. And I'm going to say the only reason I say no, I think there's some other things that need to be addressed with teams. And some of those have been addressed, like, maybe the Steelers would have been looking at a quarterback this year, but they end up getting, Russell Wilson. So I'm going to go 4, and I'm going to go fiction. I think there won't be 5. I think 4 will go in the first round.
4. All right. I say fact. I think all 5 go. I know we've seen a lot of smoke around the quarterbacks this year. This is a huge quarterback draft class. Reminds me of the 2018 draft class in several different ways. But look, Caleb Williams, Drake May, Jaden Daniels, Michael Penix Jr., JJ McCarthy. Like I think all of these guys are first round potential. If I was a GM, would I draft? I'd certainly have preferences, and it's certain that maybe some of them will fall. But when we look at it right here, right now, as it currently stands, we've seen a lot of smoke. Typically, where there's smoke, there is fire. I say yes. Fact. What do you got?
Fact or fiction, and this is going down the free agency lane based on what teams have done. Do you think, fact or fiction,
Sure.
Derrick Henry, now that he's in our division, will be able to rush and have the same type of play that he had in Tennessee as a Raven? Will he have the same production, I guess? Fact or fiction?
This is really interesting because I think he'll be in a much, much better situation in Baltimore with a better offensive line in some ways, a better quarterback. However, look at who their quarterback is. It's Lamar Jackson. What does he do? He runs and he throws the ball. They historically, J.K. Dobbins has battled injury, and he actually just visited the Chargers, so keeping an eye on that. Gus Edwards had a pretty decent time there in Baltimore as well. Yes, I think it's possible. I think it's possible that he has his best season ever, kind of a resurgence, comes back because last season wasn't his best season. Like I 100% can see that. But I could also see him not having that same production just based off of the overall talent on the team. So right. I will say I'm going to say fiction. I think that it's kind of fiction, but kind of fact, right? Like I think he has a better season than he did last year, but I think that Lamar's going to continue to do what Lamar's always done, right. And I think collectively they will have an insane season, like the two of them together. But if it's just Derrick Henry, I would say fiction. I think.
Yeah, and for me, I'm going to have to unfortunately say fact. Okay. I think, and the reason I say this, you don't go out and get a player like Derrick Henry. And I think we may see, just putting it out there based on what we saw in the playoffs and what we saw from Lamar Jackson, we may see more of a pocket passer this year from Lamar Jackson. And maybe that is because of the free agency pickup of a Derrick Henry. I think you may see some tweaks to this offense where he's not going to be asked to do as much. Again, from that mobility standpoint where he has to go and make plays and do more in the passing game. So I'm going to say, unfortunately, I think he does have the same kind of potential he did because I think they're going to ask Lamar to do less in that space.
Sure. Emphasis on unfortunately for us Browns fans.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised to see that. Okay, last but not least, and this one pertains to the Cleveland Browns as we look ahead to the NFL draft. Fact or fiction, actually, hang on, I just got out of my notes here. Fact or fiction, the Browns' first selection will be the 54th overall pick. So my question here is they currently hold the 54 overall pick. That's their first draft selection in this year's draft class. Do you think that they stay put? Fact or fiction? That is going to be their first selection, or do you think that they trade up? You think they trade back?
Knowing Andrew Berry,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to say fiction. And I think the Browns trade back in that second round,
Agreed.
gather maybe an extra second round pick or a third round pick to bolster up the backside to, as Andrew Berry says, building a roster. I think it's fiction, and we move down in that second round. And this is kind of that last year that Andrew Berry really needs to do this, because as we all know, after this, no more first round draft picks to the Houston Texans in 2025. This is kind of his last year to build a lot of those 2025 assets, as well as maybe gain a 2024 asset.
Yeah, I say fiction. I think, I know this is kind of a cop-out answer, but I don't think their first selection will be the 54th overall pick. I could see them trading up, right, if that player's there. So if like somebody were to fall, I mentioned Mike Hall earlier, and defensive tackle, I consider that an area of need, or if there's a linebacker or somebody that is available, I could totally see them doing that. But realistically, I think those players that we are intrigued by, at that, within that range within the draft, they're not going to be there. They're going to go. So I could see them also trading back and just, building some draft capital as we go into this next year, because we mentioned at the top of the show, Dustin, I think that if we look at free agency so far this year, and I think that there's some more signings out there, Browns have done a pretty good job in filling a lot of holes on their roster for this year. Now, that does not answer the question of depth and for the next couple of years, right? That's not the conversation here. But for this year, they've done it. They've done a pretty good job with it. So we shall see. Dustin, before we turn it over to the next topic here, why don't you tell our listeners about the Barley House?
Guys, if you're going to the Barley House or Lost right next door, it's a great place to enjoy any night of the week, to go down there and enjoy some great food, some great drinks, right there on West 6 in downtown Cleveland. So if you're coming to Cleveland, come down there, enjoy. They have a lot of great fun on Friday and Saturday nights down there. And then Lost is right next door. It's more of a sophisticated place where you can dress up, look nice, look good, feel good kind of place. But if you want to, check them out online at barleyhouse.com to find out more information. Allie, I was going to say, just sidebar, because I know we're going to do a little rapid fire on some things that have been in the news with the Browns. You know what I find interesting now that we've went through this exercise? If you have a pretty decent team, I'm not saying you have to have great, but good or better, like a pretty good team, is a first round draft pick that important?
No.
And the reason I say
No.
that, because, but it's interesting, right? Like here, everybody was so clamoring when the Browns gave up these 3 first round draft picks and said, "Oh my gosh, doom is coming." And Andrew Berry systematically went with picks 2 through 7 with trading and Amari Coopers and all these things that he did to get these guys. And it's like, we didn't need that first round. So I think it's really interesting what Andrew Berry's done in this situation.
Well, I think there's just so much. First round draft picks are what they used to be. And I think that so many teams, the Browns included, have realized that and have sought the value in second through 5th rounds. You can find first round talent in those areas. I mean, like Grant Delpit, 2nd round pick, DeJuan Jones, 4th round pick. The list goes on of what Andrew Berry's been able to do in identifying talent in the draft. However, I will say, it is fun having a first round pick. The fan experience is fun, being able to buy into the drama and the smoke. And I do miss that. And I'm excited to get back into it, because I will say, Dustin, as a fan, and I'm an avid just fan of the draft and everything that goes into it. I love the NFL draft. Always have. But since the Browns haven't had selections in the first round for the past couple of years, it is different in the fan experience. And it takes the joy out of it a little bit. Sure, I'm excited for all the other draft picks and seeing how we can better this team. But, I do miss it. I do miss it a little bit. So I'm excited to get back to it. But to answer your question, no. I mean, first round picks are not guaranteed starters. They're not guaranteed You know, successful roster spots on any team. We know busts exist, and you can find value elsewhere. So
Yeah.
no.
Yeah, and I would say this, Ali. I would make this argument in the National Football League in the first round. The only ones that I think are true, you need to hit on type of things to build a great team. I'm going to
Mhm.
say quarterback or offense or
Yeah.
defensive line. I think those three positions are so important to a football team that you could have a once in a decade left tackle, right? A once in a
Sure.
generation quarterback or someone on the defensive line like a Miles Garrett. Those three players, I think those are the ones you can pull out of the first round and go, that guy's there for the next 8 to 10, those type. But other than that, you can get a linebacker in the second round. I mean, you
Yes.
can get a corner. I mean, all those other positions, even a wide receiver for that matter. But
Yes,
I think
we've seen it.
I,
You can get top tier talent outside of the first round. I mean,
yeah,
every draft we've seen this. I mean, probably since the draft has started, right? Yeah,
yeah,
you have to be able to win in the trenches. I mean, that is a requirement to be successful in the NFL, both offensive and defensive line. And you have to have the quarterback. If you don't have a quarterback, what are you? You're nothing.
right.
Now Browns kind of the exception to the rule this past year with 5,000 different starting quarterbacks, but obviously they didn't go win the damn thing. So that's my point.
Yeah,
And Joel, I see your comment here. It's a make or break year for Deshaun, and agree entirely. You've got to have the quarterback. If you don't have it, you've got nothing.
yep,
Now you can get value. You can get a linebacker later in the draft. You can get a running back later in the draft. You can get
yeah,
hell. You can even get tackles later in the draft. We've seen that. We've seen it. I don't love it, but we've seen it. Yeah, but like when it comes to your premier positions, you need an edge rusher. And yeah, you can get value, but a lot of that comes from the first round. You can get tackles. Yes, I just mentioned you can get that later, but preferably earlier in the draft. Quarterback, cornerback, you can get safeties later. So it is
yep.
important. It is important. These draft picks are important. So Andrew Berry, his team spent a lot to go get Deshaun. It is a make or break year. So I agree with that entirely. You mentioned Cade York. Let's talk about it. They signed into a futures deal. Look, I mean, a futures deal that doesn't really mean anything. It just means like they kind of have the right to pursue him, when it comes time if they want to
Right.
add him to depth there. But no, everybody, just to pump the brakes here. This does not mean that Cade York is the starting kicker for this upcoming season.
Dustin Hopkins, albeit if he's healthy, is the kicker for the Cleveland Browns.
Excuse me. Sorry. Had to cough
Yeah, you're
there.
good.
Real quick, before I want to finish with stadium discussion.
Okay.
Before we get into that, Dustin, I do want to talk about our friends over at the Hartville Marketplace and Flea Market. Look, you've been there a million times. You've seen Joe Flacco. You've met Nick Chubb. You've done it all. Tell us about the place.
Oh my gosh, Hartville Marketplace and Flea Market. They have had every Browns player you can imagine down there, and will continue to have people down there, like the William Shatners of the world, Ric Flair, all these amazing people that are just other characters that you want to go see down there. Also, by the way, they have the biggest and amazing hardware store. I've never seen anything like this in my life. And then, of course, they have the Hartville Kitchen. If you want some great home scratch kind of kitchen food there, it's a great place just to take a drive for a couple, take an afternoon, go down there. You were fortunate growing up; it was right in your backyard. But if you live in the Cleveland area, or if you're visiting Ohio, it's worth a drive. And by the way, if you want to go check out the Amish country, it's a great place to go while you're checking out the Amish country and the
That's
countryside
fun.
in the
Yeah.
Cleveland area. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's fun.
All right, let's talk about it. Let's talk
Oh,
about the stadium.
by the
This
way,
is controversial, right?
I had no idea. Why I had a little bit of an idea. That's why I put it out there. Like, here's a little grenade, and said, "Hey, do you want it downtown, fully renovated, or do you want it in the burbs in Brook Park with a big old dome?" Now, I do find this very interesting. Jimmy and Dee Haslam came out and spoke a lot more than they have in the past at the annual
Mhm.
meetings about this thing with the stadium. And the lease is expiring. Do you stay here? Do we do? In the past, Jimmy and Dee had said we are 100% committed to a stadium downtown, fully renovated. That was kind of last fall. That has completely shifted. I wouldn't say completely shifted, but now the argument or the statement from the Haslam says, "Hey, we are not favoring one or the other. we are okay with a $1 billion renovation in downtown Cleveland to the current structure. And he said if that did happen, you wouldn't even recognize the stadium because $1 billion renovation to the stadium outside my window here, that's almost like building a new stadium with an
Right.
open air. I mean, at
Right.
that point. Or do you want a dome for $2 billion with all the parking and the amenities that come with it? Now,
Yes.
I'm just going to go. I'm going to go out here right now and just say this. I love our stadium. I love that it's downtown. I live downtown. I know a lot of people love tradition. They love the stadium. I don't like being cold. That's fine. But, I'll go out and watch a game. Do I want to get frostbite and lose limbs? No, I don't want that either. Okay. So here's the thing. What I think can happen with a dome is the economic impact it can make to an area
Yeah.
like this. I live here now. And I will say this, you get a dome, and somebody brought this to my Danny Cleveland brought this up. You guys that know Danny Cleveland here. He was speaking to someone that works for Lucas Oil Field. They have 300 plus events a year in that
Yes.
place.
Yes.
So to think
So
about what that, yeah, go ahead.
sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. I mean,
yeah,
for what I do for work, I do have a day job. I travel quite a bit. I mean, this past, I don't know, last March, last-ish, something like that. We were down in Atlanta, and the conference that I was at rented out the entire Falcon Stadium, Mercedes-Benz, whatever it's called.
yeah,
Rented out the whole thing. We had tables, we had stage, we had everything. We were in the stadium. It's not just hosting Final Fours. It's not just Super Bowl. It's not just drafts.
right.
It's not just concerts. It is real estate
Conventions.
conferences,
Yeah,
conventions,
conventions.
things
Yeah.
like that. It is more than what you can even imagine. So, what do you think? I mean, where do you fall on this? Because I get it. I kind of see both sides, right? But I
Yeah.
am where I fall. If I want to go see a game, I would like to be warm. I would like to be in a t-shirt, in a dome, even if it is January. I'd like to be nice and toasty with my nachos. I don't have to worry about my gloves and fixing my hat. No, I am just cozy in a dome. What do you think?
Well, I'm going to bring up something, and I think it's very important to bring this up. I think the type of fan that went to a game 30 years ago and the type of fan experience today is very different. And I'm
Very.
using you, and I'm going to bring you because you're younger compared to people that have been going to games 40 or 50 years. The reason that the Cleveland Guardians have renovated and are renovating hundreds of millions of dollars to Cleveland Guardians to Progressive Field over here is because guess what? I kind of fit in this. You kind of fit in this. I don't want to sit in my seat the entire time at a football game, right? I don't want to sit down for 4 hours. I'm not moving, watching the game. People like to mingle. They like to go to the beer garden. They like to do this. They don't want to have to be seated in that. And I think these new stadiums go. These new stadiums go to that. I was out at SoFi. That was a mansion for an NFL stadium. I mean, that thing is
Sure.
beautiful. But guess what people were doing? They were getting up. They were moving around because guess what? There was a concourse in that place where even if you got up, you can still see the football game. You don't have to be in your seat. It's a very open dome type of situation.
So
So
let me ask
I
you
think,
this.
yeah,
So when you were there, you were at SoFi, and let's just say something, Browns score, or I mean, obviously you're not going to erupt in SoFi, but let's just say the Chargers score, the Rams score, is the place erupting, even though people may not be in their seats. Is it still a similar fan experience? Now that's a bad example because both the Rams and the Chargers have very tepid fan bases, but you get my
I was
point.
like, no, because I heard more Browns fans at that game than I
You
did
get
there.
my point
I,
here.
Yeah, I think in the right environment, yes, it's the same experience. Because guess what? It's the same people. They're still going to scream like they
Yeah.
do at Browns games in the dome. And in fact, you know what it might bring? It may bring even a more deafening, loud,
Mhm.
decibel type of situation where you've got a quarterback going like this because he can't hear in Cleveland because the fans are so rabid. And on top of them, it
I
actually
mean, look
may
at
create even
Minnesota.
a it may create an even better home field advantage in
Yeah.
the big scheme of things if you think about it.
It's
Because
gonna be
guess
warm.
what? Well, Allie, here's the thing. I guarantee you that game a couple years ago where the Saints came here and they played the Browns and it was like 0 degrees. If you
Negative
panned
12, I
out,
think it was.
yeah, but if you panned out, everybody's in their seats. You know where they're at? They're up under there getting warm because they can't sit out there in the elements, right? Now, if I can go to a game in January and get 70,000 people in there screaming and the decibel hits 120, 130, I'm all about that. That's cool. Like,
Yeah.
let's do that because that will change the game. That will change the
Well,
entire
let me tell you this.
complexity.
We went to I don't remember when it was, but sometime this winter, David and I went to it was around Thanksgiving time. So cold. We went to a Detroit game in Detroit. What do they have? They have a dome. And it was in November. It was when they played the Broncos. Russell
Yeah.
Wilson came into town with the Broncos. They played in Detroit. And it was nearly a game that mattered, but it was a playoff environment. It was deafening. It was, you know, 60,000 of Detroit's closest fans, closest friends, all in the same place, and it was
Screaming their heads off. Right?
deafening, unlike anything I've experienced. So,
yeah,
I don't think it's going to diminish the fan experience. I don't think it's going to diminish home field advantage, anything like that. I think sign me up all day. Look, I hate going to Browns games, especially in the winter. Well, only in the winter. I like going to Browns games. It's fun. But in the winter, I hate going to Browns games because look, I'm a Carolina girl. I like the warm, so I don't like being cold. I think that you're going to get more people that are going to be more likely to bring their family, especially maybe some young kids, to a game if they know that it is temperature controlled. So I don't know. Let us know your thoughts. I think it's really interesting to see how both sides are kind of going head to head here. But at the end of the day, you know, it's all about the fan experience. It's all about, you know, what's best for this team. So, you know, it's a fun conversation. I think.
It is.
You know, it's not.
But I do think the fan base experience has shifted, and I think you see
Sure.
more and more domes. You see more and more. I don't want to call them like, you know, but here's the truth: Jerry Jones reset the script when he built Jerry's World down there in Dallas.
Yeah.
And I think every team, and I you know, I love Buffalo Bills fans. I don't know what they were thinking to build another outdoor stadium when every one of their games are canceled. In bad winter games, and they have to move and they have to go play in a dome in Detroit. So it's
Yep.
like I don't, and maybe it's a funding issue, and I don't, you know, mean that in a bad way.
Sure.
Maybe
Sure.
they knew that they couldn't get $2 billion funded to build that brand new stadium. There wasn't the political wherewithal to help with county and state and federal,
Yeah.
you know, all those things that go, the very complicated things that go into building a new public-private stadium. So anyway, I just, of all places, if I was Buffalo, I would have put a dome. Like,
Yeah,
done.
that it's no question. Guys, before we wrap up, just a quick word from our friends over at Circle K.
Only.
Circle K's new free Inner Circle membership program is all about making it easy to reward you with the things you'll love. Sign up and save 25 cents per gallon on your first 5 fill-ups. Plus, get every 6th free on a tasty selection of Circle K products. We're talking piping hot pizza, fresh coffee, ice-cold fountain drinks, and more. Join Inner Circle for free by downloading the Circle K app today. Terms and conditions apply at participating locations. Visit CircleK.com for details.
All right, and with that, we are over an hour. We've talked a lot about football. What do you got, Dustin?
I would just say our great friends over at Circle K, we were able to give away a $100 gift card down at the event down there in Massillon, and they were very excited. I don't know if you've seen gas prices lately; they're just not the nicest things in the world.
No, they're not. I just filled up today, actually, and
Holly's like, "Hey, I could have used that gift card."
yeah, that would have been nice. Yeah. But look, this was a lot of fun tonight. You know, bear with us through this off season. You know, I know there's not a ton to talk about as it pertains to your Cleveland Browns, but some of these are my favorite shows because we can get creative with it and have some of these fun conversations that we wouldn't otherwise be able to talk about during the season because we got to talk about, you know, a crazy play that Kevin Stefanski drew up and what it meant and why he didn't call the timeout there. You know, we got to talk about that kind of stuff. So fun to be able to dedicate time for stuff like this during the off season. So thank you everybody for tuning in. We appreciate you. Stay safe, stay healthy, and as always, Browns fans, go Browns.